Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 20th of September, comes to you from London. Dollar still sinking lower this morning, just bearish below the cloud, just testing support here. We've got two downside targets, some 1% to 3% lower, so we are just seeing the dollar coming off a little bit. And over the last several months, really, it has been quite flat when you look at it, hitting some resistance there. This is the dollar index, of course. Looking at the euro against the dollar, reflecting the inverse of that, of course, we're seeing the euro not quite nudging resistance here, but it is looking bullish above the cloud on the short-term chart, and potentially due to make a medium-term transition. So currencies really the majors here just in flux, and we see here the dollar yen chart is looking bullish in all three time frames, and we are seeing a transition here, so weaker yen. Looking at sterling, we're seeing sterling sitting at this 131.73. We were nudging 132 yesterday. We were briefly through there on the inflation numbers, but we've come back a little bit on Brexit uncertainty. So we're still seeing sterling looking pretty strong against the dollar. Against the euro, we saw that spike really yesterday, a lot of uncertainty during the day. But overall, we're still bearish, medium and long term. And looking at the Swiss franc, we're seeing sterling looking stronger here, and against the Aussie dollar, actually looking a bit weaker on Aussie dollar strength. Bitcoin had a fairly wild gyration yesterday as well. We sank lower and then suddenly we jumped higher, so we are seeing just a lot of volatility there in the short term. Medium and long term, we're still bearish for Bitcoin. Looking at the S&P 500 index, US stocks pushing higher last night. Not much higher, but just pushing higher all the same. Hanging on to the gains from the day before, which is quite critical. Nasdaq was barely changed. The Dow actually also yesterday was looking a little bit stronger as well. So we're seeing stocks across the board just pushing higher, and that's quite interesting there. We see that Dow was up quite a bit. Looking at the Russell 2000 index, we're seeing here as well moves higher, but overall we're bearish on the short-term chart. The futures this morning, little change there. And if we look at the Nasdaq E-mini, we see here we're down slightly this morning. UK market has looked a little bit stronger this morning. We're starting to see signs of a transition to short-term bullish. Of course, the medium-term chart is still pretty bearish, as is the FTSE 250 looking pretty strong short-term, but medium-term still bearish below the cloud. The DAX has actually made that transition, starting to look bullish on the short-term chart, and the CAC 40, much the same picture we're seeing here as well, moving higher. The Nikkei in Japan was little change yesterday, but hanging on to the gains that we've seen in recent days. Weaker yen helping there. The Hang Seng was little changed, but still just making that bullish transition despite all this trade war sentiment. The Chinese market not managing to get above the cloud on the short-term chart, so still looking fairly bearish. And the Sensex index is sinking lower, so we are just seeing India looking less good. And the Aussie market was down 1/3%. Brent crude also looking stronger this morning, sitting just below that $80 mark, so still bullish in all three time frames. And WTI also in the low 70s, looking more bullish and closing the spread between the products there. US nat gas holding steady at $2.91, so we are seeing an improvement there. And if we take a look at gold, gold back above the $1,200 mark, so that's looking stronger as well. And we are just seeing here a weak recovery really for gold. And if we look at silver, much the same picture, bullish above the cloud on the short term, but bearish overall. US 10-year yields sitting at 3.07%, down about 50 basis points yesterday, so we're just seeing slight deterioration from the high, but still looking very bullish. And if we look at bonds, German bond sinking lower still, so weak bond prices, higher yields. That's very much the theme for this year. Apple shares, which be obviously being closely watched as part of the tech move, still bearish short term, but looking amazingly bullish on the medium and long term charts. But we're just seeing a sell off in the short term. Amazon, much the same picture, down 0.75% overnight. Alphabet or Google still lagging behind a little bit, but were up yesterday. And Facebook just struggling in these low 60s area, at 160s area, so still looking pretty bearish on the chart there. Microsoft came back quite significantly back to the 111 area, but down 1.5%, but 1/3%, but still looking pretty bullish compared to the other tech majors, especially on the short-term chart. Netflix was down 0.2%, and Tesla was also weaker to the stronger to the tune of 5%, so looking better there. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.